Great, thank you. Well, good morning. Welcome to the first General Government Joint Subcommittee meeting of the 2021 legislative session. Since this is a joint meeting, would like to introduce the subcommittee to all the to the world who's watching and to all the other members. And I think I'd like to start with Assemblywoman Peters, the chair of the Assembly Subcommittee, and then Assemblywoman Hadigi, the vice chair. And so we'll be alternating back and forth, and between myself and Chair Peters and Vice Chair Hadigi. And so today I got the draw to start with Senate side, and then the next General Government Subcommittee will be chaired by Assemblywoman Peters. We will be going over quite a few different agencies and subject matter in this committee, and I'll start with reading off maybe all of the ones that we'll be looking at. And today we're starting with agriculture, but in this committee, we'll be talking about Department of Administration, Department of Taxation, Department of Agriculture, Commission on Mineral Resources, Department of Business and Industry, Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, Silver State Health Insurance Exchange, Commission on Ethics, and the Public Employees Benefits Program. And if we could, Mr. Thorley, if you could call roll. Or actually, I'm sorry, I believe it would be the committee secretary today calling roll.
Assemblywoman Gorla.
Here.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hadigi.
Here.
Assemblyman Levitt.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Here.
Senator Dennis.
Here.
Senator Goycochea.
Here.
Chair Brooks.
I am here, and future meetings, I think, establish if we have a quorum present and mark members present as they come in. So I would like to, since we are doing things a little bit differently this year, obviously, we have different policies and procedures for public comment and participation. Before we begin, I would like to explain how virtual committee meetings will work, since this is a new process for all of us. As you know, the Legislative building is currently closed to the public. So all committee meetings will be held virtually, meaning committee members, staff, and everyone else will participate either through Zoom, video conference, or by telephone. However, there are various ways members of the public can engage with us and participate throughout the process. As in previous sessions, all committee-related information is available on Nevada's Electronic Legislative Information System, or NELIS, which is accessible from the legislature's website. There are 4 ways to engage with the committee. These include registering to participate in a committee meeting through the new system on NELIS, which places you in line to testify on a bill or provide public comment during a meeting. Or you could submitting written testimony to the committee, email address, or fax number listed on the agenda for every meeting. Sharing your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on NELIS, or viewing committee meetings online through NELIS or on the legislature's YouTube channel. During the 2021 legislative session, to testify in a bill or to provide public comment, members of the public must first register for the meeting you would like to participate in. Committee meetings are listed in several places on NELIS, and to register, simply click the Participate button near the meeting date and time, then fill in the required information, such as your name, the agenda item you're interested in, and your position on the bill. Once your registration is submitted, you will see a confirmation screen, and you will also receive an email with the phone number and meeting ID to call at the time of the meeting. Just a note that while meeting registration is required to participate, it does not guarantee that you'll be able to speak. Similar to previous sessions, testimony and public comment may be limited due to time constraints. When you're on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered and follow the verbal prompts provided by BPS staff so that you know which keys to press to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Staff will call on you to speak by the last 3 digits of your phone number. Detailed for participating in committee meetings are also available on the, which is linked in the banner at the top of every page on Nellis. If you need assistance with any of these processes, or if you would like to receive electronic notification of the committee's agendas and minutes, please contact our committee manager at the committee email listed on the agenda. Excuse me, while this is going to be a little clumsy at first, BPS has done an amazing job of setting up a process that is really more accessible to the public than the Nevada Legislature has ever been. And so I look forward to hearing some public comment as we, in this committee and others, as we move forward. I would also like to remind the members of this committee that if you have a question and you would like to be recognized or ask a presenter a question, please go to the chat function at the bottom of your screen for this committee meeting and type in that you would like to be recognized, or if you have anything that you need me to do. And you can also go to the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen and raise your hand. So that will be for every committee. I don't know that I'll necessarily remind you every committee, but that's the process that I'd like to use if we could. So today we will be getting a presentation from the Department of Agriculture, and I'm sorry, we're going to take public comment at the end of every meeting. And so at the end of the meeting, when the presentation's done, we'll take public comment from the general public. Today we'll be getting a budget presentation from the Department of Agriculture on 9 different budget accounts. And to kick off that presentation and to walk us through that is Director Ott. And I'd like to welcome you, Director, and begin your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Brooks. Thank you, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Ott. I'm the Director for the Department of Agriculture, and I'm absolutely pleased to present to you today our budget, our governor's recommended budget for the Department of Agriculture. As I share my screen here. And if nobody sees that, just let me know, but I think you should be able to see that. Before I begin, I just wanted to make a quick note. Because our pre-budget hearing was last week, I've opted to take just the facts approach today in the interest of time. And so I will do a quick review of the process behind building our budget, but much of the presentation is just going to be the facts of the budget. And Chairman, I'll check in with you as we go. Let's see. There we go. So the mission statement for the department is to preserve, protect, and promote Nevada agriculture. And agriculture is defined as everything that the department has purview over, everything from seeds in the ground to the animals that we work with, to transportation, to food distribution. So we work to preserve, protect, and promote those industries and those members of the public. Our recommended budget here today is listed out for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. We accomplish all of our activities with 157.5 FTEs. And as you can see, the Department of Agriculture is predominantly federally funded. The second area of funding is fee funds, and then we have less than 2% general fund that we work with. We have 5 divisions within the department, and all members of divisions are here today to answer any questions that you might have. Our Deputy Director, Jerry Conrad, and Fiscal Administrator, Katie Jameson, are here from administration. Plant Industry Division is Administrator Ashley Jepson. Animal Industry is Administrator Doug Ferris. We have Administrator Cadence Matievich from the Division of Consumer Equitability, and Administrator Homa Anushapur from Food and Nutrition. We do our work out of 3 main offices. Our headquarters is located in Sparks, Nevada. We also have a large office in Las Vegas, Nevada, and an office in Elko. And the budget we are presenting you today is based on the strategic plan that we have developed after a year and a half. And again, in the pre-budget hearing, I went through quite a bit of the background and how we get to that strategic plan. I'm not going to go through that today, but we did come up with 5 goals that we are addressing over the next few years. Our first goal is to modernize statutory and regulatory framework, and that will be evidenced quite a bit by the number of BDRs you'll see from the Department of Agriculture this legislative session, as well as the number of regulation changes that we are undergoing over the next few years. Our second goal is to increase financial stability. This is 2 tracks. One is to increase the federal funding and the variety of federal funding that we receive at the department, as well as working to align our revenues and expenses more accurately at the department. Our goal 3 is to increase economic development opportunities, and that is working with both industry and the public to work across and improve across all of agriculture and food distribution. Our goal 4 is to become a customer-focused organization, and this is really looking at our processes and procedures inside the department to make sure that we are functioning as efficiently as possible and really keeping an eye on those customers that we serve. And goal 5 is to create a cohesive organization. And this is to really look at our internal processes, our employees, helping to set up better retention, training, succession planning, and those activities. So I'm going to tackle the first budget on our agenda today. This is budget account 4554, and 4554 is under the administration division. This division is funded by cost allocation, meaning costs spread out over the entirety of the department. And I just want to make a note throughout the presentation. I didn't include every single decision unit in this presentation. There's some decision units, such as the EATS charges that happen across every budget account to support IT. We also have some decision units within the budget. You'll see moving janitorial costs or maintenance costs and things like that. And this is really due to our cost allocation methodology, and to make sure that we are following a well thought out methodology across the department. So I'm happy to take questions on those, but I didn't include them as part of the budget process, as it's a little bit of just sort of technical cleanup on the budget side. So to start 4554, our first decision unit is E550, and this is the decision unit requesting authority for the Laboratory Information Management System. This is a software program that would be used for all of our laboratories across the department to standardize the software that we are using. We have 12 laboratories in our headquarters in Sparks, and I've listed them out here so that you're aware. And, you know, all of these laboratories are working on different systems. Some have a current LIMS system that is very specialized. Some are working off spreadsheets. Some are working off of very outdated systems. And this is a way to having a LIM system is a way to operate our laboratories in a more efficient manner. It allows us to track time. It allows us to track sampling better. It allows us to provide results to our customers in a more efficient way. And so this is really a backbone of a laboratory system. And so this is what we're requesting today. We did receive our EATS endorsement on August 24th. So we have gone through all of the required state processes for software procurement. Our next item for this budget account is E231. This is requesting a new personnel analyst position. And again, as we mentioned in Goal 5, to create a cohesive organization, we are needing a personnel analyst position to function for a variety of different reasons. Currently, the only personnel that we have is working directly with DHRM. They are working with us, and we contract out for those services. However, the Department of Agriculture has a few classified lines of employment that are very unique to the department. And we also have issues with retention. We're looking to improve our engagement, improve our succession planning, and we are also very excited about the implementation of Smart 21. And so we need a champion for that process as well. So that is our request for this budget account. And our final two requests for this budget account is E225. We're requesting temporary IT staffing through a contract position. We have a significant backlog of IT tickets within the department. As I had mentioned in the past, this was a backlog that we experienced prior to the pandemic and work from home processes, but it's really only gotten worse as we're working from home and relying on technology to do much of our work. As of the time that our budget was submitted, we had 160 open IT tickets, of which the oldest ticket was 11 months old. And so we are requesting a contract position to update and remove that backlog of IT issues that we're experiencing. And finally, with this budget account, I have grouped E900, E901, E910, and E500 together. This is a movement. It's basically a flip-flop of positions. We moved an administrative assistant 4 position from the Food and Nutrition Division to the Administration Division, and flipped an administrative assistant 3 from administration to F&D. And so we just reversed those positions mainly because it functioned better and worked well with our line of reporting and our planning. And so that is 4554. Chairman Brooks, at this time, would you like me to pause after each budget account or after each division? How would you like me to do this?
Yeah, yes, please. Let's pause after each budget account and see if we have any questions on the individual items within that budget account. And I do believe that we have a question from Senator Dennis on this budget account.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about the laboratory system that you want to put in. You talked a little bit about this. Is this an off-the-shelf? Is it an off-the-shelf system?
Yes, it would be off the shelf. Jennifer Ott, for the record. Yes, it would be off the shelf system.
So it's something that other agencies like yours across the country are using?
Jennifer Ott, for the record. Possibly. We haven't selected a specific system. That's to come in the contracting and procurement process. As part of our research for budgeting and providing this presentation and providing a recommended budget, we did contact several departments of agriculture as well as other state departments of other entities around the United States and got some ideas on what they were using and contacted those companies, which is how we ended up with the costs that we're presenting with you today As to the final selection, there's the procurement process and working with EATS still has to happen. So I can't answer that for sure.
Okay, so is it your intent then to aggregate the data that you currently have on disparate systems and aggregate that all into this new system?
Jennifer, yes, absolutely.
And so I would imagine that would be part of the process, as well as you mentioned, I'm going to kind of combine a couple things here because you mentioned hiring a contract position for IT. Is that correct?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, that is correct.
So would that position be helping with this at all?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, no. This that will be specifically to tackle the backlog of IT tickets we have for current processes and current systems.
Okay.
The LIMS system would the entire package would incorporate assistance training, that kind of thing, from the company that we end up with.
Would you anticipate that new system, that they would also provide ongoing support?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, that will be one. I hope so. That would be our request. Absolutely, that we'd have support ongoing.
So that would be an ongoing cost also, right?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, of course, a maintenance cost and a maintenance contract. We would be looking at that for the next biennium as part of an ongoing cost.
Great, thank you. And then what's the time frame that you're putting on to go out to bid and get it installed and have it up operational?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, it's hard to say if this were approved as part of the budget, and once the budget is approved, we can start working through that process. Some of the timelines are not always what we can control. We have to work through, of course, Department of Administration and their purchasing process, and then EATS as well. We're looking to implement this on our side as quickly as possible. We have a lot of work in front of us, as you've mentioned, taking the data from current systems across the department and integrating it. So coming up with a plan. We have the outlines of a plan already on how we're doing that, but we're looking to start this right away, but we don't control all the factors.
Thank you. So do you anticipate that what is your current IT staff? How many people do you have?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, we currently have, I believe, 3 IT staff, an IT manager, an IT pro, and I apologize, I don't remember the title of the third member of IT.
So do you anticipate that they will be doing the ongoing, on your end, the ongoing support for this new system?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, the IT manager will be the project manager on the Department of Agriculture side for this project.
So you don't anticipate any new positions that you would need to run the new system?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, not at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we have Assemblywoman Hattigi has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. And my question's regarding the new personnel analyst position. I'm assuming there's been challenges using the Division of Human Resources Management, which is why you're asking for a new personnel analyst position. Can you talk about what needs you have that the division hasn't been able to meet? And have you discussed these needs with them in order to see if they can fulfill them instead of creating a new position?
Yes, Jennifer Ott, for the record, thank you for your question. Yes, we absolutely have. We remain in close contact with DHRM. I heard that you're going to be talking with the Department of Administration, and might be something you want to speak with Director Freed about. But from the Department of Agriculture's perspective, DHRM has some empty positions. They are also understaffed in this area, and so really a lot of the HR issues that we come up with take a very extended period of time. There's often, I think, requests for extensions on investigations or other HR activities is more the norm than the exception. And so, that's part of the request for this. On the department side, if I may be absolutely frank with you, our deputy director is currently our HR person in the department. She runs, recruitments and a lot of those activities, and it would be great to have a personnel analyst to do that work.
And if I can ask a second question, Chair?
Please do.
Okay, and then, so do you foresee, if this position is approved, moving all of your functions from DHRM over to this new policy and this new analyst position? Or would you still lean on the division for certain functions?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, we would still lean on certain functions we would still lean on DHRM for certain functions. For the more technical functions, investigations and the like, we would still rely on them.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I just want to follow up on Assemblywoman Hadege's question. So if you were to get this new position and you're still using DHRM to do some services, I'm not familiar with how the costs are allocated across agencies to DHRM. Would there be a reduction in your cost allocation from DHRM if you had a new position, or would you still be paying that same amount in addition to the new addition, the new position?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, we would still be contributing some fundings for those functions to DHRM. If you would like a more detailed answer, I might kick it to my deputy director for that discussion. Jerry, are you on?
Yes, hi, Jerry Conrad, for the record. So the functions that agency HR would continue to serve, which is how I understand it, is something they do for other agencies who currently have personnel person on staff, would be sexual harassment or discrimination type investigations, versus the department, if we had a personnel person, would be able to do those non-discrimination, non-harassment investigations in-house. I'd also like to just add that the agency HR services, who we have a good relationship with, they don't actually address some of our some of the things that we, as without a personnel person and without these duties falling under agency HR, that we are not able to address. And we have about 46% of our positions are unique positions to the department, which just, brings a level of complexity sometimes to recruitment or retention or succession of those of those positions. And that's one of the things, if we get this position, that the analyst would be charged with doing, which would be drafting a recruitment plan, a retention plan, a succession plan, things like creating ladders, addressing, unique needs of these positions, looking at strategies on recruitments in hard to fill positions, that kind of a thing. As well as we have about 20% of our employees will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. And approximately 34% in the next 10 years. And we really are trying to, plan for that, create again, strategies where folks who might be a 1 or a 2, have a ladder to move up and stay within the department in those unique positions that can be hard to fill. So hope that helps.
That does help, Ms. Conrad. I appreciate that. And I think that you've given us questions to maybe ask when Department of Administration's up and just kind of get an understanding of you're facing these issues, so is everyone else. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I believe Assemblywoman Miller had a question as well.
I do. Thank you so much, Chair. And this is continuing on the same conversation we're having about the analyst position. When I'm looking at the what's recommended for the allocation, there seems to be a 30% increase between years 2022 and 2023. And can you help me understand what would be included in that 30% increase request?
Absolutely. Jennifer Ott, for the record. The 30% increase, it's not an increase. What it is an adjustment. So once our state budgets are approved, we actually cannot start hiring until October of the first fiscal year. And so that decrease in that first fiscal year across any of the positions takes into account that those positions it takes a while to get through the state process, to get them set up, to get them into recruitment, that kind of thing. So it's not a decrease, it's accounting for those months that there's no hiring.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. And so I think that's all of our questions on this budget. And if you, Director Ott, if you want to move to the next budget in your presentation.
There we go. Going back to sharing screen. There we go. So our next budget accounts on the agenda are 3 budget accounts underneath the plant industry division. The first budget account is 4545. This budget account is funded both by fees and federal funds. Our first budget request in this budget account is E227, and this is equipment for the hemp program. These budget numbers encompass 3 items, a high performance liquid chromatography machine, and this is used for analyzing THC levels in hemp samples. This machine is getting to the end of its useful life, and as you can imagine, it's pretty important to our hemp laboratory to have a THC machine in working order. We're requesting a fleet services vehicle to allow for field inspections and an ISO accreditation audit costs to ensure the lab is operating efficiently and with precision. So this is a contract for ISO accreditation. There was a question in the pre-budget hearing about whether this was enough funds to help with the hemp industry, because in the past it has been growing quite a bit. And I did want to provide background that in December's IFC through work program 53344, we did add 2 positions to the hemp industry, which should help a little bit with some of the delays that we have experienced. I'm also excited to announce that the USDA did come out with their final rule very recently on January 19th, which will also help with some clarity around this hemp program. And so that is the request for hemp. Same budget account, E722, is a request for authority for a fleet services contract for our seed program. Our seed program at the department is charged with both making sure seeds are sold without any noxious weeds in them, but also to make sure that seeds are sold without any disease or pests. And specifically, this contract would be used for inspectors that walk allium fields, and alliums are both onion and garlic. They survey for white rot, which is a disease that is regulated at a federal level and a state level. And we produce quite a bit of onion seed and garlic seed in the state of Nevada, and we continually have increased acres that we have to survey. And so this removes some of the burden of sharing vehicles and getting our inspectors out to more fields in a timely manner. So this is for the fleet services contract. And to address Assemblywoman Miller's question on this slide, when you contract with fleet services and they have to procure additional vehicles oftentimes they cannot get those vehicles until the December after the budget is approved. And so that is where you're seeing that difference from the 2 fiscal years. So a same budget account, request E280. This is to request a new agriculturalist for our pest control operator program. Our pest control operator program both inspects and license all pest control applicators and businesses in the state of Nevada. And our staff we have 3 staff members currently, and we're currently able to complete approximately 150 to 200 inspections per year. And we have a list of licensee numbers here, kind of ranging in the 1,800 licensees in the state of Nevada. So obviously, we're not able to inspect approximately 10% of them. Additional support is needed to correct non-compliance of pesticide application. As we do inspections, we see unlicensed activities, pest control companies working outside of the scope of their licensed category, label violations, record keeping requirements that are not up to date, or staff that have not been properly trained. And so much of the industry is in Las Vegas, and so we're requesting that position for our Las Vegas office. And the final authority request for 4545 is E225. This is to increase the travel in our noxious weed program. As I'm sure many of you remember, last year and continue to have conversations on fire and fire adaptability, and noxious weeds is very much a part of addressing our landscapes and making them more fire resistant. We continue to work with other agencies on invasive species and noxious weed problems in the state. And this is to, when we can travel again, to allow our staff to be up to date on the latest methods, to share that information, to work with all of the states in the Great Basin. As we say over and over again, weeds know no boundaries. And so this is an opportunity for our staff to do that. And Chairman, this concludes budget account 4545.
Thank you, Director. I know we have a few questions on this, but I skipped right over, unfortunately, Senator Goicoechea on the last budget account, and I know he has a question regarding that. And so, Senator Goicoechea, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Brooks. As always, I'll have a number of questions, but I do appreciate it. I just wanted to clarify, Ms. Ott, that you talked about the 11 connecting the computer capability for the 11 labs in Sparks, but I guess I would also include the metrology lab in Vegas would be connected into that. And then I was curious about the lab in Elko, the animal disease lab in Elko. Is that still functional?
Thank you, Senator Goicoechea. Jennifer Ott for the record. Yes, my apologies. The LIMS system will be department-wide, so it will be for all laboratories. My intent in listing out the laboratories at the headquarters, just to introduce the committee to the scope of the laboratories that we have under the department. So yes, it will be a department-wide initiative. As to the Elko laboratory, it is functioning. There is equipment there. We do not have staff for the laboratory in that. We had a vacant position, and when the pandemic response took place, that position was vacant. We were in the middle of reclassing a biologist position to a laboratory position so that we can make that laboratory fully functional. But because that position is generally funded, we've had to hold that vacant.
And your PCR machine is still in the Elko lab?
Jennifer, for the record, I will have to check with our laboratory. I think we might have moved that to the reporters to make use of it, since we'd rather use it than just leave it sitting there, but I'll have to double check. We've also, throughout the COVID-19 testing, we've lent our PCR machines to the University Medical Center in Las Vegas as well. So if I may follow up with you later, I don't know the exact location of that PCR machine at this point, but I can find out.
No, I'm fine with that, Ms. Ott. I just wanted to make sure it was being used someplace with the COVID. And then with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I would move into the question on the hemp, and that's going to be another huge moving piece in my district, and I think for all of the state. And do you currently have the ability and to get out and get a timely test and the analysis done on hemp, Jennifer, with what you've got in place?
Chairman Brooks, may I proceed?
Oh, please do.
Jennifer Ott for the record. Thank you, Senator. Yes, you know, hemp is one of those industries that has thrown us a curveball, I feel, every single season. There's been some new challenges, whether it's a challenge to the state or a challenge through federal regulation or frankly, an ambiguity of federal regulation. And so we have learned some lessons. We understand that we've needed positions. We've been working to get those positions in place, and they've come to a culmination at this December IFC. I believe so. I think we're in a good spot. 2020, because of the federal regulations and frankly the pricing on CBD, we have seen less crop grown in the state than in the previous years. So the 2020 growing season did see a decline over the 2018 and 2019 growing seasons. And so we think that we're in a good spot now. That laboratory position that we have approved is going to provide significant assistance.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and then do you have a staff enough? Again, I think it's a very narrow time frame in the harvest period to actually get out a 5-day window to actually test this. The hemp crops in the field for THC. You do have, even with, I see you put in for a vehicle or two, but you would have the personnel to accomplish that.
Jennifer Ott for the record, yes, I believe we do have the personnel to accomplish that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. And on that same subject, I think Assemblywoman Haddocky has a question as well.
Chair Brooks, my questions were on ISO. I believe it was Vice Chair Peters who had questions on this decision unit, on this piece.
Assemblywoman Peters, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Glad to hear you guys are updating the chromatography machine. I did see that it's 11 years old, and I'm just wondering if you can kind of quantify like the increase in your efficiency and analysis that you will see with this new piece of equipment. And I was also wondering about the extended maintenance costs, and if you guys, because I think your slide said you'd have a 3-year maintenance cost, but if it has a lifetime of up to 10 years or so, what do the future maintenance costs maybe look like? And will those be like contracting extensions or otherwise? Start there. Thanks.
Jennifer Ott for the record, my apologies. You're asking about the increased in capacity, I think I apologize. I was remembering the first part of your question. So the HPLC, the addition of the, Jennifer Ott for the record, the additional HPLC equipment, of course, we will see some additional capacity because we will be using both machines at the same time. And so we will see additional capacity. As for the numbers of samples and the throughput of the new machine and how much faster a sample can be analyzed with the new machine, I might have to get back to you on that one. I don't know off the top of my head on the the specific question of that. But we will be using both machines side by side until the other one just breaks down. The maintenance contract, we are trying for every machine that or every piece of equipment that we purchase at the department to include those maintenance contracts. We have experienced over the years, if we're not including the maintenance contract, then we do have to source outside for contract support for maintenance. And that ends up being a little bit more costly. And so, yes, after this maintenance contract runs out, we will be requesting in another budget process an extension of maintenance contracts, probably at a much reduced rate. Not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's helpful to know for future budgets, because I expect we'll probably see this next session to extend those maintenance contracts for maybe the session beyond that. But I did have a quick follow-up, Chair, if I may.
Please.
Just following up on the lifespan of these machines. Your current machine being 11 years old, how do you have an expected lifetime of that? And beyond that lifetime, do you expect to pursue having a secondary or backup machine in the future, if possible?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, potentially, as long as the older machine is still functioning, we don't see the need of purchasing a third at this time. As for the useful life of that, Administrator Jepson's on the call. Ashley, I don't know if you know the answer to that. We might just have to get that. We might have to provide that at a later time.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide that information. And I just want to emphasize that, oh, sorry, for the record, Ashley Jepson, Plant Industry Administrator. We do have 3 machines. So there is one that's available for a backup should need be. They started to, some of the older machines that we've started to see fails around 9 years. And that's one of the particular critical pieces, as the failures that we've had have created significant delays in turnaround, which, as Senator Goicoechea brought out, has significant implications to our producers. So making sure that they're maintained, making sure that they're up and running and in good condition is really critical for our turnaround time and helps justify our request as well.
Thank you for that. And if you don't mind following up with staff on those expectations, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Assemblywoman Howdigi had a question as well.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. And I have a couple, if that's okay, in a couple of different areas. I wanted to move over to the ISO accreditation. Can you walk us through a little bit what those requirements look like to get accredited, and then also what the costs are associated with that accreditation?
Jennifer Ott, for the record. So ISO, specifically ISO 17025, which is the laboratory accreditation process that we anticipate going through, is an internationally recognized laboratory process, accreditation process for labs. We are looking for specifically our hemp and pesticide laboratories to be ISO accredited. That internationally recognized process really, we would be under an audit schedule through ISO. I believe it's an annual audit schedule once we are accredited. It's looking at standard operating procedures. It's looking at safety items. It's looking at training for the chemists that run the analyses. It's looking at your tracking and record keeping. There's an entire accreditation system with ISO, which also ties into our request for our laboratory information management system. A LIMS system is not a requirement of ISO, but it really sure, with the amount of document tracking and tracking of analyses and timing and history, makes things a whole lot easier. So I hope I answered your question on that.
Kind of, and you kind of answered my other question too, but I mean, basically, like, how much is it going to cost to get this accreditation? How long is it going to take us to get this accreditation? And then you said we have to renew our accreditation every year, so will there be a cost for the renewals as well?
Jennifer Ott for the record. At this time, I'm unsure of the cost, frankly, because we are just in the initial scoping stages. So what we're requesting in our budget today is to have an auditor come out and basically, point out our areas of where we need to improve, and then we'll build a plan from there. And so we are asking for that initial process to happen, and then that initial, it's sort of a pre-audit audit, if you will. And then there would be an additional cost moving forward with the audit process, but it's fairly minimal. And so we're still looking into that, down the line. And so that's to come in future budgets.
Okay, and then so the initial cost is just going to be for the initial audit for the ISO audit, and then there is a small fee associated with continuing to get the accreditation every year. And then how long do we anticipate until we receive the ISO accreditation? And then what's the benefit of doing this? I mean, would we be eligible for additional federal funds if we are accredited?
Jennifer Ott for the record. As far as the timeline, there is no specific timeline. It's really, moving as fast as you can to accomplish the findings in the pre-audit. And so the timeline is dependent on how many things that we have to address. It's also, I used to work for a laboratory where the ISO audit took 2 to 3 years. That was a process, there was no dedicated person. Everybody sort of just worked on the ISO accreditation process and building the SOP bank and all of those items over time. It could be shorter if there was a dedicated person, so we still have to look at that. So there's no set timeline, as in once you start the process, it has to be done in 6 months. That it's just sort of when you're ready for your final audit and to be accredited. As for the ISO accreditation, it's not necessarily an eligibility. It's a accreditation process that is a marker for laboratories to show that you are following proper standard procedures. It's potentially, I guess, I haven't thought of it that way, to be honest with you, that we potentially could take on other works that need ISO accredited laboratories to do the work, but not a direct funding eligibility.
Okay, perfect. And then so since there isn't a set scheduled time for how long it takes to get accredited, is there a goal date for the department? When do you guys want to have the ISO accreditation received by?
Jennifer Ott for the record. I'm sorry, I'm smiling because I always like to move faster than I think my staff likes me to move. So, it depends, I think, also on the LIMS system implementation as well. And so there's many moving parts. I would love to see certain parts of our lab having, or at least getting very close to ISO accreditation by the next biennium. But as to how realistic that is, I won't know until we have the pre-audit and go through the LIMS purchasing process.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chair. And Chair, can I just ask a couple of questions regarding the hemp exposition and then the lease fees for the fleet services?
Yeah, thank you. Please do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then just a couple of questions regarding the registration fees for the U.S. hemp exposition, and then also the lease fees for the vehicles. Are in any way that were already included in your base budget? Just, I remember some of this from the work we've done in the IFC biennium.
My apologies, Jennifer. Can you repeat that first part? I'm.
Yeah, it looks like there's a request for reserve reductions for the registration fees for the U.S. hemp exposition and the North American chemical residue workshop, as well as some fees to cover a monthly vehicle lease for your fleet services.
Yes, Jennifer, off the record, I'm going to kick that over to Administrator Jepson to answer those questions.
I just want to make sure that these weren't duplicated in any way in your base budget.
So for the training, for the record, Ashley Jepson, Plant Industry Administrator. For the training, they weren't able to attend in our base year, so that's why we're requesting it. Again, with kind of the momentum in the hemp industry, making sure that the labs are operating with some level of uniformity, that they're staying up to date with the federal standards is really critical, which is why we have that request in there for this next biennium budget.
And then for the vehicle lease fees, are those in any way duplications? Were they counted for already in your base budget? Do you know?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, one vehicle was for our current program manager. However, we're asking for a secondary just because when those requests for sampling come in, we need to hit the ground running. So one will actually be in the Las Vegas office, and then the one that we already have in our base is in our Sparks office.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hadagi. Assemblywoman Gorlow, did you have some questions as well?
Thank you very much, Chair. I was looking over the pest control operators program and noticing 150 to 200 inspections a year with over 1,700 licensees, which that's a lot of licensees. Could you provide a brief overview of the pest control program, including how the position would help address the issues with industry noncompliance?
Administrator Jepson.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, happy to provide an overview. So our inspectors, they're not just serving in an inspection capacity. Folks actually have to apply to become licensed operators. So that requires a fairly extensive amount of knowledge of the laws. They have to be tested and evaluated to ensure that they're aware of federal requirements, and it all has public and environmental health implications. So they have to demonstrate that they have that knowledge, pass the test, and be licensed. So that's one piece of it. Also, some key business operators, if they are actually coordinating the business, they have a separate licensure. And then also our staff are out inspecting those that are actually applying the pesticides. So those that have tested, demonstrated their adherence to the requirements, we're going and making sure that that's actually happening. So that's a key piece in our enhancement request, is to get another staff out there that can make sure that what's happening in the field, what is actually taking place on sites is meeting those requirements and isn't posing potential threats. So there's a lot of moving pieces just because of the risks associated with pesticides. But that's a condensed view of what they do. But as mentioned, testing, they have to apply for licensure, be approved, and then we have folks actually out in the field. And I want to stress that our all three inspectors are having to help with the licensing, with the testing, with the continuing education credits. So there are a lot of moving pieces to this program.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair?
Please.
Thank you. So with the existing staff, does that mean, because that's a lot of inspections plus a lot of licensee, is there a backlog currently with the inspections?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, I will say we want to cover a larger portion of our inspections. We're not able to hit the percentage that we really need, which is substantiated by some of the ongoing non-compliances that we are seeing with those that we're able to hit that 10%. So this would allow us to be more efficient and would allow us to cover a larger group and strategize more on the groups that we are hitting. So if there's a backlog, we're definitely not hitting the percentage that we would like to.
Thank you. And just one more quick question. What kind of outreach activities is your department doing to ensure that those with the proper licensing, that they're aware of the requirements?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, our pesticide compliance team, they participate in a number of different education activities with extension, directly with industry. And really our key focus is always education. The ultimate goal is to get people in compliance and to be aware of why those rules are in place. So every time we do an inspection, it's our ideal time to provide education and where some areas can be improved. So when we're in the field, we're educating. We do multiple annual trainings. Just even with COVID, I believe we've done 3 virtual trainings to help people meet those requirements, and we try to encompass stuff that we're seeing frequently in the field as non-compliances, and then those also that are of particular concern to public and environmental health. So education is absolutely a key focus to help people meet the requirements.
Great. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlow. And thank you, Ms. Jepson. I think that might be all of our questions on this budget account. And I think maybe we can move on to the next one.
Okay. Jennifer Ott, for the record, our next budget account that we will review is also in the plant industry division, budget account 4540. This is our general fund budget account. We have 2 items that we will review today. The decision unit E680, it's a transfer of funding for an environmental scientist. So this transfer of funding is to provide some general fund relief. Our environmental scientist, we were taking some funding from the 4545 budget account to cover personnel costs for our environmental scientist. The environmental scientist, his primary focus is drought conditions in the state. And so with the transfer of funding to provide general fund relief, they will work partially on drought projects, but then also partially in our environmental services and pesticides group. So they are still working environmentally. They're still looking at waterways. It's not necessarily drought focused. Our second decision unit for budget account 4540 is to eliminate the 0.5 FTE agriculturalist position. This is a little bit of just cleanup for our budget. This position was implemented in the 2017 session through Governor Sandoval's drought initiative. The funding was not maintained in 2019, and that position has remained vacant. And so this is just a bit of cleanup for that position for this budget account. And I believe that is all for this budget account.
Thank you. And if any of the members have questions on this particular budget account, if not, I have a few.
Chair, if I may, I have a question related to that, just a clarifying question related to the part-time agricultural position. Did you say you're eliminating the position entirely versus maintaining vacancy?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, correct. There hasn't been funding for this position since the 2019 session. And with it being a general fund position, there's no intention of requesting further. So we are eliminating that position.
So who's currently doing the work that would have been completed by this position?
Administrator Jepson, if you can.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, Nevada Department of Agriculture. I'm sorry, were you asking who was previously? You cut out a little bit at the initial part of your question.
Sorry, yeah, I'm wondering whether there are still duties that would be under this position and who is completing those duties, or if there are currently duties that are being performed because of this position vacancy.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, thank you for the clarification. When that position was initially approved in the 17 budget session, it was to administer grant funds. They were also part of that budget. Those grant funds haven't been present since, I believe, the close of 2018. So being that it's key, what it was actually intended for funding, it is no longer there, that the grant funds are no longer there to provide drought relief. So as a result, it hasn't made sense to proceed with it.
Thank you. That helps clarify quite a bit. However, if I may, Chair, have one more follow-up question related to this area.
Go ahead.
I am just interested in if you still have drought-related activities occurring under different funding mechanisms. Can you just address some of those areas and the stability of those funding mechanisms?
For the record, Ashley Jepson. So the other position that we do have that's being as part of the budget reduction, that position is still a key priority in doing drought outreach, doing drought education, doing technical assistance with producers. So that position, though it will be limited with the reductions, will still be serving in that capacity and providing that assistance in terms of drought for our state.
I'm sorry, I just have one more follow-up to clarify. Do we still have federal dollars or grant dollars that are towards addressing drought, or is this fully state or agency funded?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, and I apologize for the confusion. When I referenced the grant funds before, those were were sourced from general funds. We do not currently have any grant funds or federal dollars to support drought initiatives, though it is an objective of our still existing and filled drought position to assist with connecting some of the federal resources with our local producers. But we don't have any in-house at this point in time. It's a goal.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And Assemblywoman Hadigi?
Thank you, Chair. I just had to unmute myself really quick. And I just have a couple of questions regarding the funding source changes for the environmental scientist position. And the first one's just kind of quick. The funding source changes, are those changes that you're requesting, are those going to be permanent, or do you foresee them ending at the next biennium?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, we are hoping that those are temporary changes.
Okay. And then if you could just walk us through how the department determined that 50% of the position's cost should be supported by fee revenue?
Jennifer Ott, for the record. So in order to hit the target budget reduction deadline, or goal, requested by the governor's finance office, with the department receiving so little general fund, really my goal for the department was not to eliminate any positions, especially positions that are currently filled. And so really we were trying to find little dribs and drabs, trying to put together the requested reduction. And so this was part of that effort, is to being able to provide general fund relief by, making up with fees and transferring and sort of amending that position a little bit to reflect the new funding source.
Okay. How did you guys get to that 50% was the ideal percentage?
Jennifer Ott, for the record. So the request was a 12% reduction department-wide. So first we took the vacant positions, held them vacant, reduced obviously travel fees, reduced some operating costs, took a look at what was left, and that's how we came to that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next up, I think we have Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. And I am going to follow up on some of the questions that Assemblywoman Howdy had. When we're looking at that 50%, when we say with fee income, my first question is how can we guarantee that there will be enough fee income to support it at 50%? And also, what are those funds currently being used for? Because if there's fee income coming in, I imagine those are already being used to support other functions. And so as I'm hearing this discussion, it feels like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like we would literally transfer money from something else that's already being supported by that fee income to support this position. So if you could explain, one, how do we guarantee we'll have the fee income to support it? And also, what is that income currently being used for, and what will support whatever it's currently being used for?
Administrator Jepson, you probably can answer this with better detail than I can.
For the record, Ashley Jepson. So one thing I want to clarify is the shift of duties to that 50% fee funds. Their duties will actually be changing. So their drought will remain the 50% that is generally funded, and their other duties. We found that there is a need for assistance with additional groundwater monitoring, in addition to some, as we talked about, some of our pesticide compliance inspections. Being that there was an additional need there and a fill, the position will be helping with that 50% of the time. So the fees that actually go to support that service will be covering the activities they're implementing, whereas the other 50% that's funded out of this budget account will be focused on drought initiatives. So there will be separation where each is funding for intended purposes. And our pest fees, and also we get federal dollars as well to support our groundwater monitoring, are consistent and certainly will support that level.
Follow up, Chair.
Please.
Thank you. So just for clarity, when you're saying that the duties are changing, we're not eliminating duties that are necessary. Are we saying that those duties that we're shifting away from are no longer required and will no longer function? Because I just want to make sure that we're not, missing something as we're shifting duties and shifting that income over.
For the record, Ashley Jepson, as you can imagine, duties for drought assistance and providing assistance to our producers is absolutely critical, and that will remain its key focus for that 50%. Due to the budget reduction, the ability to have that impact at a full FTE is certainly reduced, absolutely, but it still will be serving in that capacity, just on a reduced basis.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Miller. Senator Gokachia, did that clarify it for you? Do you still have a question? Senator Gokachia, you're muted.
Still muted. I should be. Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Just a clarifying question. Are you anticipating a fee increase to cover this? And if so, what does it look like?
Jennifer Ott, for the record, no, Senator, we are not anticipating a fee increase for this.
Thank you. I think that might be all of our questions for this budget account, if we want to move on to the next one.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, the remaining budget account for Plant Industry Division is budget account 4552. The decision unit E275 were requesting authority for an additional agriculturalist position This is, again, this is our federally funded budget account. This is a federally funded position to include an additional survey coordinator who would perform quarantine disease surveys, detection and monitoring in our fields, and protection of agriculture through pest detection, disease protection, response if there is a disease found, and agency collaboration, both on a state level and on a federal level. As you can see from the numbers here, we continue to see an increase in plant samples that were received, and our federal partners agree that an additional position is needed to cover the workload. And that is it for this budget account, Chairman.
Thank you. Could you describe the workload demands that support the need for this position?
Administrator Jepson, if you can cover the duties.
For the record, Ashley Jepson. Yeah, this position, it does represent statewide surveys. So as part of our cooperative agreements with our federal partners, we perform surveys on plant pathogens throughout the state. It allows us to detect early on if there's a pest of particular significance and to be able to react before it has major implications. So it will be providing these surveys and working with our other team to strategically and efficiently get these surveys out. It's in the past, we've only had seasonals fill this need, and with hiring delays, the challenges with getting them trained to effectively do the surveys has been a problem. So having somebody that's seasoned, knows what to look for, knows where the critical areas are, and how to make sure that we're doing a comprehensive survey of the state is the key focus of this position. So it will be able to get those surveys established earlier on in the season, and to work with the rest of our team in hitting the ground running, so to speak. So it will be able to meet our federal obligations and cover a lot of our very rural areas as well.
Thank you. And it's federal grant funded, and is there a sufficient administrative allowance available that would fund the grants and project analyst position?
For the record, Ashley Jepson. So the grants and projects analyst position, that actually needs to be removed from this request. It was actually approved in a December work program. So if you see that in front of you, it is in the process of being removed. We do have sufficient funds to support this position through our current grant awards.
Thank you. That explains my confusion. And on the new agriculturist position, how are the recommended funding sources and percentage allocations for this position determined?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, I do apologize. You cut out about mid-sentence. Could you repeat your question?
Oh, sure. So new agriculturist position. And I'm wondering, how were the recommended funding sources and percentage allocations for that position determined?
For the record, Ashley Jepson, for the plant survey coordinator, the agriculturist position, it is the pathogens that we're surveying for and strategy is approved through and discussed with our federal partners. So those federal dollars are specific to what we're surveying for. And so that funding route was how we determined how the position would be funded based on the duties they'll be providing.
Thank you. Any of the other members have any questions on this particular budget account? Well, I don't see any, so I think that we can next budget account.
All right, Jennifer Ott for the record. We'll, following the agenda, move into the animal industry division with budget accounts 4550 and 4546. Our first budget account of 4550 is funded by both general fund and fees. Our first request here is E800, and that is allocating the division administrator's personnel costs across the budget accounts that are within animal industry. You'll see this enhancement unit item throughout all of the animal industry budget accounts. And this is mainly an attempt to also gain some general fund relief for the personnel costs that are associated with the division administrator's salary. It's also sort of equalizing and allocating across all of those industry budget accounts. E125 is a request for temporary staffing to fund the routine clerical work and for staff that happens on a seasonal basis. As we are continuing to work on, as I mentioned, one of our goals is updating and modernizing our statutory and regulatory framework. As we are continuing to update those, many of those are happening in animal industry, and there is quite a bit of work with workshops, phone calls, responses, all of the duties associated with that. Also to pick up some work from licensing and permitting and inspection renewals. The next item is E682. This is holding vacant the biologist position to address the general fund shortfall. And we touched on this a little bit earlier with the ELCO office. This is the position that was vacant in the ELCO office at the beginning of the pandemic. We were mid-reclass to a laboratory position to support that ELCO laboratory. But because of the pandemic and the general fund shortfall, we are holding that vacant through the biennium. And with that, that concludes 4550.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my questions are regarding, I guess whenever I see a funding source change, I just want to get some more understanding on what the rationale is behind that. So I see here that there's a funding source change recommendation for the division's administrator position. Can you explain why and how that decision came about?
Happy to. Jennifer Ott for the record. In the pre-budget hearing, I touched on it a little bit, but I'll review a little bit today as well. Part of work that has been done for the last year and a half has been looking at the operations of the department and how, without any budget requests, we can improve those internal operations. And one of the ways that we determined could gain some efficiencies was reorganizing the dairy and processing program from the nutrition division, food and nutrition division, to the animal industry division to align like with like. The animal industry division has laboratories, dairy has laboratories. Their functions, at least the core functions of microbiology and microbial analysis, are the same, or at least very similar. And the animal industry division has inspectors, dairy has inspectors, so we moved that over. In order to, like I said, provide some general fund relief and also to account for the administrator's new duties with reorganizing the dairy program into the animal industry division, it was determined, through discussion it would be best to cost allocate the division administrator's salary amongst those budget accounts instead of having the salary applied to just the one budget account.
And when you say that we determined, can you explain a little more in detail how that determination was made? Was there a time study? Was there some type of a formal needs assessment or analysis that was conducted?
Absolutely, Jennifer Ott for the record. So we began with an analysis of what our regulatory and federal duties were to this program and to that industry. Then began looking at all of the job duties and the job functions that were working within that, looking at their work specs. Then we were looking at, is there any gaps from the industry, areas that we were not providing service or providing a less than optimal service. We, spoke with industry members, our board member in that area. So it was started with basically an information gather, and then looked at from there, how can we then best optimize this program and move it going forward. The dairy program specifically is under another budget account that we'll hit later on in this hearing. And I do have a note actually on one of the slides that we are still, as of the building of this budget, we were still mid-review of this program. We still have work to do with this program. And so this is just sort of the beginning to address some of the immediate issues. I hope that.
It does. I'm getting closer to the understanding.
Okay.
So I just, two quick follow-up questions, Chair.
Quick, please.
Okay. And so how do you determine the actual cost allocations? And also, would this, when you say your need gathering, would that documentation be available if we were to request it to review how that process went?
Jennifer Ott for the record, the second portion, absolutely, of course. Everything we do is public record. And so not only available to you, but frankly, anybody who asks for it. So yes, we can provide that information. We are transparent on that process. As far as the intricacies of the cost allocation and the actual numbers, if I might ask that I might be able to provide that to LCB Fiscal for follow-up. I don't have the actual equation with me.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a quick comment, Senator Goycochea.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, Senator.
I'm just concerned about this because we are actually taking a position that would deliver a service, and we're maintaining it vacant, and I agree with that given the budget shortfall. But I am concerned about replacing that position with an administrator, and so I will continue to look at this very closely. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, might I provide a clarification?
Please.
Okay, Jennifer Ott for the record. As Senator, one is not with the other. The division administrator position is following a cost allocation equation and methodology, and the hold vacant for the biologist position is to address general fund shortfall. We're not replacing one with the other. There's no intention to do that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And I think Assemblyman Gorlo had a question as well.
Yes, thank you, Chair Brooks. And my question was in regards to the vacant biologist position. Again, you did mention that was in Elko. Is that correct?
Jennifer Ott for the record. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. And can you tell us a little bit more about the specific duties that that position would hold and how that having that existing vacancy has impacted the agency's operations?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to pass this off to Administrator Ferris on the details of that position in Elko.
Good morning. For the record, Doug Ferris, Division Administrator for Animal Industries. The position in Elko was a biologist 3 position previously. And as the director said, we were in the middle of reclassing that to a microbiologist 3 position. And in doing so, then we would be able to perform all of our lab duties and functions out of the Elko laboratory by having a full-time microbiologist 3 in that position.
Thank you. Can you explain a little bit how having that vacancy has impacted the agency's operations?
Yes, for the record, Doug Ferris. It has impacted us as far as we are not performing tests currently out of the Elko office. We do collect samples. If veterinarians or producers bring samples in, we do collect them at the Elko office, and they are shipped to our Sparks Animal Disease Laboratory. But there's currently no testing being performed at the Elko laboratory with that vacancy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just don't see any other questions on this budget account, so if we can move on to the next one.
The next budget account on the agenda is also under Animal Industry, budget account 4546. We have 2 requests under this budget account. E722 is the, sorry about that, I got a little click happy. E722 is for a fleet services contract for a law enforcement vehicle lease. This is to replace a vehicle that we have currently, a 2004 Ford Expedition that's in excess of 169,000 miles. So it is exceeds both the date and the mileage requirements from the state administrative manual. So we are switching to a fleet services lease for cost savings for that replacement. And then again, as we've discussed, you'll see E800. This is balancing out the division administrator's personnel costs over the budget accounts. I just wanted to make note, I was hoping to present to you a livestock inspection business plan that we had submitted to IFC in June. This has been a major initiative to the department and to this budget account. In 2019 legislative session, the department did receive a letter of intent because of the declining reserves in this budget account. But unfortunately, we just haven't had, this hearing came up a little quickly. And so we are still working with the governor's finance office on the details of the business plan. And I'm hoping that I get the opportunity to present that to you at a later date. And this concludes 4546, Chairman.
That is one of the problems about being the first agency to present and in this committee. Isn't fully baked yet. So we look forward to hearing about that and seeing that hopefully soon. But I think Senator Dennis has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about the travel and the freeze on your travel budget. Can you talk about how that's been changed because of COVID-19? Especially in respect to your inspection program.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, if you're referring to the 4546 inspections that occur under this budget account,
yes.
To be honest with you, not much has changed. The inspections under this program are deemed essential services by the department. Brand inspections are a critical part of moving cattle and other livestock across state lines. They require brand inspections, health checks, that sort of thing. And so in the interest of keeping the livestock moving and to maintain a food source and maintain those logistics, there's been very little decline in this area. There has been a delay, mainly because I'm sure we've all heard about the processing challenges across the United States, but I would not say that there has been a decline in this budget account specifically.
So it sounds like you're able to get the inspections done that you've been able to in the past.
Jennifer, up for the record, yes, Senator. We have.
And then can you give us an update on the agency's plan to address financial solvency, including what steps are anticipated to be implemented in the 21-23 biennium?
Jennifer Ott for the record. I wish I could, Senator, but that was the business plan that I'm referring to. It does address the solvency issues. Again, I apologize. We just are not able to, we're still working with the GFO on that, and we're not able to present it today. I wish I could, because I think that we've come up with a really great plan. We've been talking about it with industry for quite some time, and are starting already through some of the early workshops and regulation change process. But I do hope to present that to you at a later date.
Did you know what the time frame is for that?
I'm sorry, I don't. Jennifer,
Okay.
for the record, I'm sorry, I don't.
If you could definitely get with our staff to make sure that they get that, that's real important that we get that.
Jennifer Ott for the record, absolutely, Senator. I agree, and we absolutely will.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Dennis. And like Senator Dennis and obviously everybody else on all the other committee members, this is a pretty important piece of this because this is an ongoing issue and we want to get to the bottom of it sooner than later. So we'll work with you on that and look forward to seeing that business plan and working with all of our staff.
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. Please go ahead. I was amazed that I hadn't heard from you yet, Senator.
Well, I was just waiting for an opportune time. Again, this is a real tar baby. And I think Ms. Lott would concur with that. It's got a lot of moving pieces. The thing the committee has to understand that, for interstate commerce of livestock in the state to happen, this has to be in place and it has to be right. And otherwise we're talking, $1 billion industry going out the door. So, between health papers, brand inspections, there's just a lot of moving pieces, and I really sympathize with them. I know industry's working on it. I know Department of Ag is working on it, but it's not going to happen quickly. Hopefully we will have an answer and a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, and so I'm a lot of conversations about this here during this session. So, but we can let's move on to the next budget, and you present on that.
So, Chairman, in respect to the items in order on the agenda, we're going to move away from animal industry and move to consumer equitability, and then come back to animal industry, if that is all right with you.
That's all right with us. That's in the order that you have it listed here on our agenda anyway. So.
Yes, it is in the order of the agenda. So Jennifer Ott for the record, we're moving on to the Division of Consumer Equitability. The Division of Consumer Equitability has one budget account, 4551. It is a fee-funded budget account, and we have a few decision units to review today. The E550 is for the new management software. We're calling this our inspection software. This implements an inspection software system to support our processes relating to licensing, inspection, certification, and regulatory activities for the Weights and Measures program. The department sees this as an entry to a larger overall inspection program for the department. It is a recommended move for the LCB performance audit that many of our inspection processes and systems throughout the department are paper-based or using Excel, and I think maybe you might have caught on that I'm a big fan of technology. And so we are moving to an off-the-shelf inspection software program with this. It will span 2 biennium, and our target live date is in fiscal year 24. Our decision unit E230, the LIMS system. So not to be confused with the overall LIMS system for the department, which we have listed under the administration division. This is a monthly subscription for the current LIMS system. It's in consumer equitability. This is a stopgap to fund the LIMS subscription until the department LIMS program can get into place. E229 is to fund ongoing preventative maintenance and calibration of existing laboratory instruments. That is this maintenance contract that we will see in the future. This one is specific to consumer equitability equipment. Also within the same budget account, we have E227. This is funding contract services to install and replace the humidifier systems in the metrology laboratories. Humidity is an important aspect of weights and measures, critical weights and measures, especially when you get down to the 0.0000 gram. So humidity and humidity control needs to be very precise. And so this is to install and replace that system. Request E228 is for an administrative assistant position in our Las Vegas office, where much of the weights and measures work is done. This is to increase the ability for our inspectors to do inspections rather than administrative tasks. And so with the with the addition of this position, we anticipate that it will free up 30 hours per week of time spent by inspectors on administrative tasks. As devices and as the population grows across the state, but especially in Clark County, we really need to have our inspectors out in the field rather than in the office. Request E712 is for a truck replacement. This is a truck that exceeds our age requirements by 13 years and mileage requirements by 83,000 miles per the state administrative manual. We are buying a used truck, and this truck is in the shop quite a bit. So we are asking for authority for a replacement in the second year of the biennium. E226 is to fund required training for our inspectors from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And E225 is the budget category that eliminates costs associated to the metrology lab in the Las Vegas office. This budget request created quite a bit of questions in the pre-budget hearing, and so we have included a few slides to explain the history around this budget request that had been proposed by some of the committee. And if I may, Senator Brooks, I will transfer this over to Administrator Matijevich to handle those next few slides.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Cadence Matijevich. I have the privilege of serving as administrator for the Division of Consumer Equitability. And I'll try to move quickly through these next few slides. I know that time is running short. Quickly, just a couple of acronyms that I will use as we move through these. NIST and NIST OWM, the National Institute of Standards and Technology Office of Weights and Measures. RSA, which is Registered Service Agency or Registered Service Agent, and PT, which is proficiency testing. So the question of what is metrology? Metrology is the science of measurement, embracing both experimental and theoretical determinations at any level of uncertainty in any field of science and technology. So measurement science isn't just purely the preserve of scientists, it's of vital importance to us all. We are all dependent upon metrology for consistently accurate measurements, and metrology truly serves as the foundation for the activities of our weights and measures program. There was a question at the budget overview or presentation last week of what services does the lab provide? The lab maintains the state's primary standards and laboratory reference standards, which you see some photos there on the slides. We perform calibration services for field reference standards, and we issue certificates of traceability for those standards. And as an example of some private industry field reference standards are used daily to confirm the accuracy of high precision scales used in hospitals, pharmacies, in the nanotechnology industry, and now more commonly than ever in marijuana establishments. So this next slide gives an overview of, a summary overview of the financial analysis that we performed on the metrology program. You can see there on the left, the revenue history for the program, and on the right, our fiscal 22 program expenses. These are, of course, forecast numbers. You see on there, our revenue versus our gross expenses. You can see that in both cases, we operate the metrology program at a loss, but that loss is much more significant with the operation of 2 laboratories. We do have some costs that we're able to avoid in our weights and measures programs by performing calibration and certification of our own internal field reference standards that our weights and measures inspectors use in the field. We perform those in-house. And so we do net those off of the metrology program expenses to get sort of to that net number. But again, you can see that we still operate this program at a deficit. You'll recall from Director Ott's early part of the presentation, our goal number 2 of increasing financial stability. Operating programs at a loss certainly is not sustainable. And so we did an analysis and looked at this to see what we could do to reduce that shortfall. And we came to the difficult decision that while we have enjoyed having 2 laboratories operating in the state, that it is not a sustainable business model. And on the next slide, you'll see why that's the case. With 2 labs, we have a capacity of hours that are available for billable work, essentially outside work that we're doing for private industry and RSAs. With 2 labs, we have a billable hour capacity of 1,625 hours of metrologist time that can be spent on billable calibration services. With 1 lab, we have billable hour capacity of 900. And you see in the following bars there on the chart, what our actual number of hours billed in the last 4 fiscal years. Those obviously aren't sequential, they're descending in number of hours. So we have seen an increase over time because of the schedule on which we require certain standards to be calibrated. We do have a little bit of an ebb and flow, kind of an every other year thing, where our even numbered years, we typically see more business because more folks have their standards expiring in those years. But you can see here that even at 1 laboratory, we still would have about 30% more capacity than our current demand. At 2 labs, we have almost 75% more capacity than our current demand. And so as we look at what it would take from an hourly rate standpoint, if we were just billing those 602 hours, the rate that we would have to charge to cover our net program costs would need to be approximately $340 an hour. The hourly rate to cover the net program costs for 1 lab would be about $195 an hour. Our current rates are $75 an hour for in-state customers, $95 for out-of-state customers. Nevada is only one of 7 states who bill a different rate for in-state versus out-of-state customers. And I would note that our neighboring state rates, state of Arizona charges $100 per hour, $110 per hour with a minimum charge of $50. Utah is $50 an hour. Oregon is $110 an hour. Idaho, $40 an hour. California charges on a per calibration basis, but their rates generally amount to about $75 to $150 an hour, depending on the device type. So you could see if we were to increase our rates in order to essentially fund that additional capacity, we would far outpace the market rate. Assemblywoman Carlton asked some questions in the pre-budget presentation about our billable customers, who's using the services of the lab. You'll see there the breakdown of who's using which laboratory, and that the majority of our customers actually do use both labs. Of our customers last fiscal year, only 10 of those were exclusively using the services of the Vegas lab, 7 of those in-state customers, 3 of them out-of-state customers. I would note that we determine in-state versus out-of-state by their billing address. Many of the customers who have out-of-state billing addresses are technicians who do perform work inside of the state. And so I hope that that has helped to answer some of the questions that were presented to us at that initial budget presentation. And appreciate the opportunity for that deep dive. We did also get some questions about what we have done to mitigate the impact of the closure of that lab. We actually brought this fiscal analysis to the Board of Agriculture in March of 2020, let them know that we had come to this difficult decision and had intended to almost immediately send out a notice of the closure of the laboratory. And then, of course, we had our closure because of COVID. And so we had to do a little bit of regrouping. But in May of 2020, we sent out notice to our customers by email and postal service of the December 2020 closure. We quickly realized that in order to provide services for existing customers, to kind of leapfrog them on their certifications, that we would need to get our metrology lab back open for services to industry as soon as possible. And so we worked to modify our procedures to allow for contactless outdoor receiving and quarantine of standards for our customers. And we were back performing calibration services for our customers in May and continue to do so today. And I believe that concludes the slides that we prepared on the metrology program.
Thank you. That actually answers some of the questions I had. There's just one component in there that we talked about, and if we could just really briefly, because we're kind of short on time, if we could briefly update me on, there was an incumbent position that we moved to another part of the division, and is that taking place? Have we got that sorted out yet?
Cadence Matievich, for the record, thank you for the question, Senator. The metrologist that was our metrologist in Las Vegas is currently still in his metrologist position. We're actually hopeful that he'll be able to be extended an offer within the department. It won't be within the division. I believe that position is really just kind of going through some administrative processes with the hiring freeze, getting approval for that position to be hired. It has recently become vacant as a result of a promotion, and that our current metrologist would be eligible for a lateral transfer to that position within the department. And we are doing our very best to make that happen prior to any kind of a layoff date coming to fruition. So we're working hard on that.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that is, gives us an update that we need. And then I know we have a couple of questions on some of the other budget items or decision units within this budget account. And I believe Assemblywoman Miller had some questions regarding, I think it was E2A.
Thank you, Chair. It was about the new administrative assistant position. And if you could just briefly explain, if you could give us an update on the growth of the device inventory in Southern Nevada and the associated increase in workload, because that essentially is the reason why you're requesting the new position. And also if this will be able to affect the existing backlog of administrative work that you mentioned earlier in your presentation, and if that backlog has already impact and the impact that backlog has had on the operations thus far.
Yes, Cadence Matievich, for the record, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Assemblywoman Miller, to your questions regarding the administrative assistant position. And our workload in Southern Nevada. So approximately 70% of the 49,000 licensed weighing and measuring devices that we license in the state of Nevada are located in the Southern Nevada inspection area. And that device inventory has grown over the last several fiscal years at a rate that's bounced around a little bit. Certainly opening of new businesses has slowed with COVID, but we've seen over the last several fiscal years increases from anywhere from 5 to 8% in that device inventory. So at a total inventory of 47,000, that's a lot of devices that we're adding every year. And as Director Ott, mentioned earlier, because so many of our processes, inspection processes, are paper-based, when the inspectors are out in the field, they produce an enormous amount of paperwork that they, for quite some time, have then had to come back into the office and process. Data entry is required to get that information into our current software system, which is nearly 20 years old. Not at all an efficient system. And so for those members who serve on the Interim Finance Committee in this last fiscal year, you'll recall that we actually brought a work program forward and actually have this position filled right now through a temporary services agency. And we are already beginning to see this position pay dividends. We were able to fill the position late in the calendar year 2020, but the young woman that we've been able to hire through the temp services agency has been fantastic. She's able to field calls from customers that would otherwise have to go directly to inspectors and either interrupt them in the field, or the customer wouldn't get an immediate response. So we've seen a significant uptick in timely response to our customers. We are indeed getting caught up on our backlog of data entry, and we are beginning to see the freeing up of the inspector time pay dividends in us getting caught up in our backlog of inspections. As of the 10th of January, we run our performance measure reports on the 10th of every month. For our statewide totals, we were at about 40% of the statewide inventory inspected so far currently in the current fiscal year. That's a little bit behind where we would be if we were entirely on pace. But I would note that we, up until Monday, had a couple of vacant positions in our Las Vegas inspection team. We fortunately were able to bring on 2 new inspectors this week. So thrilled to be providing jobs for some Nevadans and getting our team fully filled. And then there are still a handful of inspection types that we can't perform safely under COVID protocols. So we're a little bit off the pace, but we have made significant improvement in addressing our backlog of inspections. And with the approval of this position and adding it to our team permanently, we would expect to see continued gains there.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I think that satisfies what we were looking to have clarified. Senator Dennis has a question, and if we could be concise with our questions and even more concise with our answers, we're running up against a time constraint here, and we have two more budget accounts that we need to get to. So, Senator Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to pose this in a way that you can just answer quickly. You've already talked about that, you need a new modernization of the system and some of the benefits and efficiencies. I guess my question there is there going to be, can you talk about those benefits and efficiencies, but just kind of list them real quick, some of the things that you'll get by getting this new modernized system. And you talked about you're currently doing it in Excel, correct?
For the record, Cadence Matievich, Senator Dennis, this particular program actually does have an older database that was built. It runs on VB6. It goes through a MySQL and Access. It's very outdated. It was custom built for us. Some of the improvements that we expect will be that just the amount of time that the inspectors spend handwriting things we can do on a tablet. We will be able to have live system in the data in our system for the inspectors to use in the field and for customers to access. Really we'll be moving out of the 90s with our systems and into the modern era.
That's actually the fact that you're in the 90s is actually good, because some of the other ones that we've been getting are coming from the 70s. So it's going to be an off-the-shelf product, is my understanding, right? That's what you said. Do you anticipate there's going to be ongoing licensing and maintenance costs?
Cadence Matievich, for the record, yes, we expect it to be a customized off-the-shelf project, and we do expect that we will have annual license and maintenance fees.
Okay, and then what's your timeline to get that done, to get the system up and running?
We are looking at Cadence Matievich, for the record, looking at a go live late in fiscal year 2024.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator, and for the replies. And I think that is all that we have for that budget item, or this budget account. We can move to the next one.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, moving back to animal industry to round out the last two budget accounts. We have budget account here 4470 in front of you. This is our dairy industry budget account. Again, E805, you see that cost allocation for the E805 is a reclass for the food safety operations manager to a deputy administrator. We are requesting that, again, in organization, looking at the positions, how we can achieve some efficiency. Originally, we had a food safety operations manager overseeing a microbiologist. Once we made the move from food and nutrition to the animal industry division, our current lab manager began overseeing that position and that laboratory. And so now we have a laboratory manager overseeing our microbiology laboratories. So this food safety operations manager, we are reclassing request to deputy administrator to help oversee the many programs in animal industry division. E712 is a vehicle replacement. These are vehicles that will be replaced with long-term leases from Fleet Services Division, and will be used by the food safety inspection staff to continue their regular work. E275 is the promotion of the dairy industry. This funds one temporary staff position as a community instructor to promote the dairy industry. This is falling in line of the revenues that we collect for the dairy industry. It's to educate youth about careers and about the nutrition of milk and milk products. And so this is for funding for this temporary position. E722 is a request for a long-term vehicle lease. The increased expense of this is because it is a truck. This is the truck that is used to cart Monique and Melissa, our dairy milking cows that we use for agriculture and dairy education, mostly in elementary schools, in other areas as well. This is currently our dairy cow Monique in Las Vegas is being carted around by an SUV that it's not rated for. It's not working very well. And so we're requesting a vehicle lease for this purposes. And if you've never met Monique or Melissa, I really encourage you to. It's a great opportunity to learn a little bit about the dairy industry. And the E800 is this cleanup and cost allocation of the division administrator's salary. As I had mentioned before, this program is still it's undergoing internal review at the time of the development of our budget submission. And with that, that's 4470, Chairman.
Thank you. And Director Ott, we need to be very quick. So on your question, your answers here, and on the next item. This I know has some intertie with the earlier budget item, but like, can you discuss the primary factors leading to the decline in the revenues in this? And have you looked at fees? This is same question basically. Have you looked at fees and assessments to determine if increases are warranted to counter that decline? And do you have any immediate plans to address the declining reserves and financial solvencies concerning this budget?
Absolutely, Chairman. Thank you for your question. Jennifer Ott for the record. Yes, the decline in the revenue for this budget account, we're still undergoing review of this budget account. But we see it as a decline back in 2015, 2016. We're still researching the history of this. There was the department made a decision to no longer collect assessments on fluid milk. We're still researching that. We don't know why, but we intend to rectify that situation. And as we're want to understand the history, understand the circumstances around it, but we understand about the declining revenues, and we are absolutely creating a plan to fix that.
And I think I'll want to have maybe a offline conversation and with some of our staff as well to understand that a little bit better, because it doesn't sound like we necessarily have a way to fix this just yet. And so I think we'll probably couple that with your new business plan conversation.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And Assemblywoman Gorlow, I think you had a question on this budget account as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and I'll try to be brief. I'm curious about the responsibilities of the division that are not being currently met with the current existing management structure. And given that the Deputy Division Administrator position would provide support for the entire division, how that is 100% under the dairy or the division rather than being the position cost rather than allocating costs to the division budgets. How is that split up? That makes sense? I was trying to be quick.
Jennifer Ott for the record, it did make sense, except you cut out a little bit. So I'm going to do my best to answer the question that I think that you asked. So as far as the reclassification of the position, we found that, again, by aligning the organization and looking at that, the inspectors for the dairy program also have an animal health component as part of inspecting dairies and fluid milk. And so currently, and we can provide an organizational chart, those inspectors work in line with the state veterinarian, which made the most sense organizationally. As you, and I agree, the reclass of the position from the food operations manager to the deputy administrator is staying in the dairy budget account, as you can see. And through your questions, there is, and by own admission, there's work to be done. in this budget account, and that's what we are anticipating the main duties.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director. I think that is, and I'll follow up on that the earlier question I had with you, but I think that's it for this budget account. If we could go to our last budget account, livestock enforcement, if you could walk us through that quickly, please.
Absolutely, Jennifer. For the record, we have just 2 requests in the 4557. This is our last animal industry budget account. You see the E800 cost allocation methodology, and then our E684. This is a position, our agricultural enforcement officer position. This officer position usually covers Eastern Nevada, mostly the Ely station. And 50% of this salary is generally funded. And so it was vacant at the time of the hiring freeze, and it is part of the holding vacant for this biennium to reduce general fund pressure. That concludes that slide.
Thank you. And if none of the other members have any questions, I have a question.
Just a comment, Chair Brooks, and maybe
please go ahead.
I think we've got a long ways to go in this particular, even though we're talking about the ag enforcement holding that position. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Director Ott, there's still some work to be done as far as how many of these ag enforcement people are going to be in place, how we're going to deal with the brand inspectors. A little premature in this budget as well.
Jennifer Ott, for the record, yes, sir, we'll cover that as far as the livestock and inspection business plan that I'm hoping to present to you.
And I think that Senator Goicoechea kind of summed that up. I think there's 3 things we need to follow up on. And again, that's what happens when you're first. But there's 3 very important things. And I think all 3 of these are interconnected. And I really think that maybe Senator Goicoechea and myself and Subcommittee Peters, any of the other members who want to be part of a conversation with all of the fiscal staff and the budget specialist on this need to have a conversation. And so I think that with that, I think we can dig in a little deeper on those 3 items in the future. And I look forward to working with you and your staff and our staff as well. So I think that wraps up your presentation of budgets today, and I really appreciate it. This was our first subcommittee meeting, and so we're still getting our rhythm. I appreciate you spending all the time of walking us through all these budgets in such great detail. And so that takes us, we'll go ahead and close the presentation. Thank you, Director Ott. And we can move to what will be the last agenda item for our meeting today, and that's public comment. And so if we can broadcast services, if you can see if there's any one on the line for public comment, and we'll wait maybe a minute or 2 just to make sure that we don't have anyone, or if we do have anyone, we can hear them.
Thank you so much, Chair Brooks. The public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Well, now that we've reached that agenda item, we just leave that open a little bit and see a minute and see if we can find if anyone logs on. And then
certainly not a problem.
Thank you. Well, broadcast services, if we do not, I think that we can wrap up that agenda item.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. The public line is still open and working, and unfortunately, there are no callers at this time.
Well, thank you. So remind the subcommittee that tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Will be the joint full committee meeting of Finance and Ways and Means. The state treasurer and the state controller will be presenting their budgets, as well as the Department of Sentencing Policy. So it's going to be a dense agenda, and it's my turn to chair that one. So I will see you all tomorrow morning. And with that, we can adjourn.
Thank you, Chair.
You, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.